I think this brings us to the main thrust of Darwin Devolves, the new science about DNA that challenges evolution. And it seems like a pivotal point of your initial work is that Darwin's mechanisms are not capable of building those complex structures. But Darwin Devolves takes it a step further, and you argue that the natural processes actually degrade complex structures for individual survival. In other words, they do it to survive, but it's degrading in a way that actually impedes evolution. That's devolution, in other words. So did I get that right?
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. And many people get confused when they first hear about this because they say, how can you degrade something or break something and have it improve a system? And one analogy I like to use is of say, a car. Suppose your life depended on your car getting a little bit better gas mileage. Mm-hmm. What could you do to quickly improve that gas mileage? Well, you can, of course, take off the doors and throw them away. You can take out the back seat or the hood or something.
Throw the spare away.
Exactly. And, those things are useful at certain times, but if your life depends on getting better gas mileage right now, then that's the smart move to make. Yeah. So it turns out that throwing things away and breaking things actually can oftentimes improve your situation. And the new thing that the book emphasizes is that's exactly what we've discovered now in the past 10 to 20 years in the cell, in the evolution of, cells and organisms too. Mm-hmm. It turns out that right now it's like in astronomy where 10 or 20 years ago somebody invented a telescope. Before then, any speculations about what the universe looked like were might have been interesting, but they're superseded by what we now see through the telescope.
Right.
In the same way, science has just in the past couple decades developed the ability to probe down to the molecular level and sequence DNA at a very, very easily in the required detail. Mm-hmm. And it turns out mutations are changes in DNA. They're changes in molecules. Mm-hmm. And if you can't determine what those changes were, then you don't know how evolution is happening, even if an organism seemingly improves. And it turns out that many of the changes that people classically have pointed to as examples of the great power of Darwinian evolution, now we know that they are great examples of Darwinian evolution, but they show broken genes, and broken genes that have beneficial effects.
So on the one hand, when we were talking about pretensive knowledge a few moments ago, since microevolutionists convinced a lot of people that the whole game is accomplished by natural selection working on mutations, they see it on a smaller level, then they just kind of wave the wand over these bigger changes. But now when without, as you just pointed out, feeling any responsibility to show specifically on a micro level how this took place, because they knew it did, so it must have. But now that we have the technique and the technology to get down really tight to the molecules, now we see that this is a difficulty and it doesn't work the way they thought it did to accomplish the end that they have in mind.
That's exactly right. And it's shown in a number of places, but let me just give you one example because I think it's the coolest one. And I opened the first chapter with it, and that's the example of the polar bear. Now, polar bears are the biggest, baddest land predators in the world, and they're thought to be descended from grizzly bears, brown bears, mm-hmm. and they're pointed to as swell examples of Darwinian evolution. They went north, became lighter in color to match the snow, and they could eat seal blubber that grizzly bears can't.
By the way, and just notice how you put that, and they became lighter in color. See, This is one of those just throwaway phrases that they only get lighter in color because there's a genetic change. That has to be accounted for. But I understand you're just telling the story. Go ahead.
Yeah. they evolved a lighter color.
Yes, right.
And well, it turns out that the whole polar bear genome was sequenced about 5 years ago, and the grizzly bear a couple years before that, and the two were compared, and it turns out that the top 17 genes that helped the polar bear adapt to the north are, well, 2/3 of them are broken. That is, or degraded. That is, they're working less effectively, or not at all, compared to how they work in the grizzly bear.
Like throwing the spare tire out, or the seats out, or yeah.
That's right, or throwing out, say, the governor that keeps your car under 50 miles an hour or something, so you can go faster.
Right.
Yeah, the white color of the polar bear's coat results from a gene that contributes to the production of a brown color in the grizzly bear, and when it breaks, it becomes white because there's no color left. And the most interesting thing is that there's a gene involved in fat metabolism, and the grizzly bear or the polar bear eats, seal blubber, which would be toxic for the grizzly bear. But it turns out that one of the genes involved in fat metabolism was broken, and that helped it to eat this large amount of fat.
Right.
So it turns out that the polar bear didn't evolve; it pretty much devolved from the grizzly bear.
Okay, so here's a real important question, because as I was reading through your book, Darwin Devolves, and I'm following this argument, this point, the first question I ask myself is, well, isn't that just the Darwinian mechanism of mutation and natural selection? Isn't a broken gene the same as a mutation? And so now there's this mutation that allows the polar bear to get white and to eat blubber where the grizzly couldn't. So how do you distinguish just the standard progression of mutations, which you're now calling broken genes, and the standard Darwinian model from actually a devolution model that you're advancing here based on broken gene evidence?
Well, now that we know about the molecular basis of life, we see that DNA is arranged into genes that have informational content. They do things, and there are regulatory regions which turn genes on and off at the appropriate times, and all sorts of fancy mechanisms. And we can identify them. We can see, once we have the sequence of DNA, can see which ones do something, which other ones just kind of connect two things together. And so when we ask the question, okay, a mutation has done something beneficial, we can ask the question, well, did it do so by making a new gene or improving it, or what? Or by messing it up, by breaking it? And, overwhelmingly, the data that has been collected so far shows that it's breaking stuff that was already there.
So improvements would be kind of adding a benefit. Degrading would be taking away a benefit that the gene had, though in a limited scope, it had a beneficial impact on that individual organism.
That's right. That's exactly right. And in desperate circumstances, you do desperate things. Well, it turns out in Darwinian evolution, everybody's always desperate.
Yeah.
But, you can think of a bridge, construct a bridge from over a river from one place to another. Okay, but now suppose somebody doesn't want you to come over the bridge and they blow it up. That's a change. But blowing up a bridge does not tell you how the bridge was constructed in the first place. It's easy to blow up a bridge. It's much more difficult and involved to construct one.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's what Darwinian evolution does. It blows up things.
Yeah, and I think the key here, and this is what helped me when we talked last time, is that when you blow up the bridge, you can't get across the river anymore.
Yeah, you're stuck.
And so it's kind of like sending something down an evolutionary dead end. So it results like the vehicle that moves faster because it doesn't have a spare tire. It results in short-term gain, but in terms of long-term benefit, if you need that, you have a flat tire, you're out of business. Because you don't have the spare anymore. And so it's kind of like going down a dead end. I think that the way I'm thinking of it is that breaking a chain gives short-term gain, but it limits the long-term evolutionary novelty or the opportunity for novelty that is required to move the entire project forward.
That's exactly right. You adapt to new circumstances, but you become more limited by doing so. Think of the polar bear again. It's doing fine in the Arctic, but suppose global warming comes along and it turns into a jungle or something.
Yeah.
Its white color, which it's stuck with now, is not going to be a benefit in the jungle, and yet it's that ability was blown up and thrown away, and so it's much more likely to go extinct than to survive.